Hi guys, Josh here, welcome to Frames Per Second. Today we're shooting with Sophie, and we're shooting the new Ekatchrome in120, which we haven't shot the 120 version on this channel yet. And I'm testing my Fuji 6x9 camera, which is 5 times the size of your normal 35, so we'll see how it turns out. Hopefully I don't mess it up because I haven't used it before, but we'll see. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to say that the shots were warmed up in the scans. So I did take some photos of the slides on a light. It is a little bit different in color with the scans. It's not as magenta, but it still does have the classic Ekatchrome kind of coolness compared to, say, Portra and Kodak Gold and other films I like to use. And obviously it's slide film, so incredibly fine grained. But this first shot, unfortunately, does have a bit of motion blur. The focus is more on the hat, but even then it's got that motion blur, so you can't even get a nice crisp focus on the hat. But I do like how it did come out in scans, and when you put it on a light that's bright enough, it does look quite nice. And so we're gonna just go to the next image, which I didn't mess up as badly, and is actually in focus. This was a front lit shot, and the focus is kind of not exactly on the eyes, it's a bit more on her hair, so I'll zoom into that to show you. But it's just a bit off her eyes, but overall the image still does look nicely in focus. Obviously I was probably at a faster shutter speed or even a higher f-stop, so that I didn't have to worry about the motion blur as much. And like I say with all slide film, is front light your subjects. I honestly do think that's how they look their best. It's how they look their most saturated, and that's just how I like to shoot with slide film. It wasn't exactly golden hour yet, but it was getting there, and it does look quite gorgeous. You can even see with the red flowers that are kind of next to her, and just like good skin color, even though she was sunburnt a bit, and it does look a bit more normalized and tan here. But the shade's got a nice blue, that classic Ekatchrome blue. I will say the one thing that this 6x9, it's kind of like when things went from SD to HD on TV, is that the flaws are more noticeable. And not only that, but they're more noticeable because of slide film. I've noticed this with every person I've shot with slide film, and their pimples and scarring and stuff like that is more apparent on slide film than it is on color negative, which is one thing you need to consider when you're shooting slide. It's not a forgiving kind of format, the 6x9, and the same goes for large format when you're shooting slide as well. But the colors are great, it's nice and sharp, and the grain is just incredibly fine. Once again, the focus isn't exactly on her eyes. And the kind of annoying thing when shooting 6x9 is just that the depth of field is so shallow that, especially because it's a rangefinder, not an SLR, it is harder to nail the focus exactly on the eyes. Especially because the focus distance on here, the closest you can get is, I think it's either 90 centimeters or a meter. If it was an SLR kind of deal, like the Pentax 6x9, then obviously that would be a bit easier. Where once again, the focus isn't exactly on her eyes, it's more towards her chest. And I'm not going to show you her chest because that's inappropriate, but here we are in the shade again. It is quite blue, and as you'll see on the slide, it is a bit more magenta and bluer as well, but it is a nice high resolution image. Once again, the flaws are a bit more apparent than they would be on color neg. And then the last one in this outfit and location, didn't really utilize the hat. Maybe I should have done more with that. It's nice, it's backlit. Once again, I am happiest with the front lit image, and so I would recommend that. The focus is more on her hat than it is on her face, which is a little bit annoying. I think there might even be some motion blur, and it was my first time using this camera, so not exactly the smartest way to test it for the first time, especially since I was shooting a film I hadn't used before for the first time. But I thought I'd just send it and do it, and unfortunately I cropped her feet off a bit. I think part of that was just because it's a rangefinder and I'm not used to how this one works, and it was a bit tricky because to focus it was always easier when you're shooting landscape. So I'd kind of focus that, then turn it, and then the position of the lens wouldn't exactly be in the exact same place, and so I think that might have had something to do with it. Which brings us to our second location, and Once again, the focus isn't on her eyes, it is more on her chest, and so I'm not going to zoom in there. But it was definitely getting darker. There were clouds starting to come, and it did rain just after we finished shooting, which was very unfortunate because I would have liked more light in this location. So here I was definitely on a low shutter speed, and even though the exposure is still pretty decent, I do just wish it was a bit brighter and we had more bounce coming from the sun, but the clouds were in the way. And with this film, I was actually rating it at 50, so I was overexposing it, a bit of a stop, just because I know E100 is a bit darker than you expect. But unfortunately, it was just too dark in this area that I had to be on f3.5, and I was at like a 30th or 15th, and it wasn't the best way to get a sharp image. I can definitely edit it to be more usable, but I definitely could have done this shoot a bit better. But the colors are nice again. If we were like front lit, it would have been really nicely saturated and bright, but unfortunately that's not the case here, and unfortunately not always in control of these things, guys. And so this shot's underexposed, and we both missed focus and had a bit of motion blur to it, so there's not much I can say about that. The grain is nice and fine, and even though it's a bit underexposed, it still does look quite nice, and you could definitely make it usable in post if it wasn't so motion blurred, but it's not a usable frame, unfortunately. But I do like how the yellow comes out, even the red. If they were front lit, they would look gorgeous, but unfortunately that is not the case here. And now this shot, once again we missed the focus on her eyes, but her shoulder is in focus, and unfortunately this shot is a bit grainier because it has been brightened in the scan, so it's not exactly as fine as slide film should be, but it's not as grainy as 400 ISO film. But the focus is not on her face and eyes, which makes it a bit distracting and doesn't make it the most usable image, though of course if I was posting on Instagram you wouldn't be able to tell as badly, so I could use it for that. I do love this format because the camera has a very sharp lens, and just the size of it and the aspect ratio, it is basically the same aspect ratio as 35mm, it's just 5.2 the size of it. And then this last shot is just shaky as hell. This is the shakiest one, the worst image and not usable. But I wasn't that happy with the pose anyway, which wasn't the model's fault, that was more my fault. Ekatchrome, it's great, it's much cooler in color, and for slide film you can overexpose it more than you expect, and so I think every time I do shoot it I will rate it at 50 ISO. A bit more magenta on the slides, but in the scans it does come out looking quite natural, and it's not that expensive. It's only I think 15 Australian. 35mm, it is a bit more expensive, but I think the medium format is definitely worth the price of it. Part of me wishes I shot this on my 6-5 just because the lenses were faster, but I wanted to play with my 6x9 camera and I still had fun, even though most of the images aren't tack sharp with their focus. So this was our 100th video. I was hoping to have a new titles animation by now, and I wanted to release it now, but unfortunately that's been delayed. We're 100 episodes, guys. We've been doing this for 2.5 years, maybe a bit less, because I think I first posted in March 2018. And I do want to thank those of you that do watch, those of you that comment. I'm not getting sponsored to do this. I'm not getting paid to do this. This is just something I'm doing for fun, but also to help other people and to educate people as well. But it is rewarding when I do know there are people watching. So thank you for watching. Hi guys, hope you liked the video. Please let me know your thoughts on Ekatchrome Unit 120. And sorry that most of the images weren't sharp. It is very shallow depth of field with the 6x9, but I hope you liked the video nonetheless. And guys, if you like the video, please feel free to like and subscribe, turn on those post notifications so you know when there's a new episode. Anyway, I'm Josh, this has been Frames Per Second. Just get out there, shoot some